Well, hey there, guys, and welcome back. On this week's show, we're doing some model finishing. Well, it never fails that in any model building series that I place here on the channel, the question that I get asked the most is, what kind of a finish do I apply to these models? And the dump truck and pup trailer build that we recently completed on the show is no different. I have had so many requests and questions as to the type of finish that I use on these models. So today, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through with you the complete process from start to finish on applying a finish to these models. And in this case, we're going to be doing the dump truck and pup trailer. So without further ado, let's head over to the bench. So here we have our dump truck, the completed model, and there's no finish. This is bare wood, all the different species here, the cherry, the poplar, etc., etc. There is no finish applied. But the first thing that you want to do is, well, you have to remember, this just came out of the shop. There's sawdust on this. And whether you can see it or not, whether you believe it or not, there is sawdust there. And this sawdust will mix with whatever finish you use. And honestly, it will just destroy your finish. It will look terrible. So you can get in here with just a clean brush and gently brush away any of the sawdust that's on the model. This really is kind of like a preliminary step. But one of the things that I like to do is, I've shown you this before, this little sport air blower. I like to blow these things off to get as much dust as I can. So we're going to start with that. Now, guys, if you don't have one of these little air blowers, you can use a compressor. I will just caution you that some of these pieces, like mirrors and that sort of thing, are very fragile. If you go too crazy with a compressor, you're going to end up breaking some of those pieces with the force of the air. As well, I will also caution you, compressed air creates moisture. In the tank, there is moisture being created. So if you're not draining your tank properly, it is possible, if you're using an airline with no filter on it, it is possible to blow moisture onto your project. So what I have here is a turntable, and this is what gives me access to all sides of the model while I'm applying the finish. So we're just going to sit this on here. I have several plywood turntables cut, and this way I can just rotate it and work on it at will. So I'm going to go back to clearing the dust, and once that's done, I'll show you the next step. Well, when you're applying any finishes, guys, please get some gloves on. It's not even a matter of the mess. A lot of these finishes are toxic, and you really don't want this stuff getting into your skin. Now, for the first coat of finish, we are going to use a Danish oil. I have had this can of Watco Danish oil probably for 10 years. This stuff lasts forever. I think it's just starting to get down to near the end now, but you want to give this a good mix, give it a good shake, and then for me, I like to decant it into small little shot glass type plastic cups. And one of these little acid brushes is perfect for applying this. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to go all over the model. We're going to start with the interior, and you'll want to really slather this stuff on. Don't be skimpy with the finish here, guys. You want to get in here and really slather it on and allow it to soak in to all of the wood that you're applying it to. Okay, and that is pretty much the interior done. We're just going to leave it for now. We're now going to move on to the exterior here, guys. We're going to start with the cab first, And again, we are just slathering this stuff on. We're not even going to be pretty with it. We're going to slather it on as sloppily, I guess, and as completely as we can. We want to make sure that there's enough of this Danish oil on the surface to soak into the model. Just be very, very generous with your coatings and you'll be just fine. Now, you want to be a little more meticulous here when it comes to applying the Danish oil on the exterior of the truck, because while the interior is going to have areas that you can't see once it's all kind of said and done, the exterior of the truck is fully visible. So try to coat as much of it as you can and get all of the surfaces and give them a good coat. Now, this will show you almost instantly if you have an area where the glue squeeze out was not cleaned up. It will show differently because it will not allow the Danish oil to soak in. And if you have a part like that, or you see a part like that, immediately you want to scrape it down or sand it to get that glue residue off. Because if you don't, it will ruin the finish of your model. I can guarantee you that. All right, we can already see here how nice that Danish oil brings out those beautiful colors of the cherry. Like, that looks amazing. It's so rich. So this is going to take a while. We do not need a video of me going around and applying Danish oil to the entire truck's outer surfaces and inner surfaces. So I'm going to carry on with this. Guys, you'll want to go around to the entire truck, inside the bed, outside the bed, underneath the bed, lift this out of the way, do what you can to get it 100% coated. And then I will show you what to do when you get that done, and I'll show you what it should look like at that point. And at some point in time, you're going to need to flip this thing on its head to get the underbody and any little areas that you might have missed. But guys, I'm just going to caution you, make sure that you're mindful of the small parts. You don't want to lay the truck upside down, or any model, not just the truck. You don't want to lay it upside down and then put pressure on a smaller piece, like say the mirrors or the horns and that sort of thing, and snap them off. At this point, that would kind of be tragic. So you want to be really careful that you're not snapping parts off. So I just have this supported underneath the bucket with a block of UHMW plastic, but of course you can support it with whatever you have on hand, as long as you're not snapping pieces off. Okay, well, this entire thing now is saturated in Danish oil. So I'm going to let this sit for about 30 minutes to allow all of the oil that we can to soak into the wood. And once that 30 minutes is up, I'm going to go around the entire model with a clean piece of brown paper towel, and I'm going to wipe the model down and take any excess oil off of it. Guys, it doesn't have to be brown paper towel. It can be any cloth that is lint-free and allows you to get the excess oil off. So let's do that, and after that, we can move on to the next step. And once you get it all wiped off, this is the hard part now. Let this sit and completely dry for at least a week. I like to let it sit there for a full 7 days, and that way the oil has a perfect opportunity to completely dry and cure. Guys, as well, I will warn you, any rags that have this Danish oil on it, do not leave them lying around your shop, guys. Get them into a metal garbage can with a lid, or even better, get them right outside of your shop completely. These rags with linseed oil and which is basically what Danish oil is, they've been known to just combust. So everything's copacetic. You've got these rags coated in this oil sitting around your shop, and out of the blue, poof, they go up, and then you've got yourself a whole different world of trouble. So let's keep that in mind and give this a wipe down, finish it up, and then I'll see you in a week. Well, it has been a week and a day. The finish here, being the Danish oil, is completely dry. It looks fantastic. It's really brought out all of the colors of the walnut, the maple, especially the cherry. The cherry looks great in contrast with the poplar. Everything looks amazing. And honestly, guys, if you want to leave it just like this, you can. There's nothing wrong with it. Danish oil is a perfectly acceptable finish, and it's a one and done sort of thing, but we're not going to stop at just the one and done Danish oil. The problem here, and it's not really a problem, it's just the way that I like to do it, is my next step is going to be applying the second stage of finishing, which has a finish to it. In other words, it's kind of a satin finish, but it still has a bit of a sheen. We do not want our tires to have a sheen. It just doesn't look right to me. So as far as the tires and the rims go, we're going to consider them as finished just with the Danish oil. So the next thing that we need to do is we need to mask off all of our tires using some masking tape. Now, guys, I'm going to caution you, do not rub this stuff down like crazy. You just want to apply it lightly because you're going to have to remove it later. And if you apply it too aggressively on the tires, you're going to have one heck of a time getting it off once you do the next step. All right, and there we have the trailer masked out. Now, guys, if there are any other areas that you prefer to keep matte with just the Danish oil on, now is your chance to prevent it from being anything other than that. So mask off whatever you want. For me, it's just the tires. If you're wondering why the difference between the blue and the green masking tape, well, the green that I have is the wide stuff, and the blue I have is the thinner stuff. And the thinner stuff is easier to mold on the inside of the tires like that. Okay, so this one's done, ready to go. I am now going to do the exact same thing and mask out the tires of the dump truck. And once we get that done, we can set up for our HVLP spraying. Now, before you get your setup done, guys, what you want to do is, unless you have a designated area for finishing in your shop that is completely separate from everything else in your shop, you need to do a bit of a cleanup. Go around with a vacuum, clean up the dust, wipe down the tools. Make sure that there is as little dust in your shop as possible. Now, I know it's not possible to get it perfect, but do your best to get as much of it as you can, because you don't want any airborne dust to be ruining your finish. Well, my setup starts off with a Wagner paint booth. It's a collapsible booth that folds up extremely small. I've shown you guys this before, so I'm not going to get into too many details. It has a 20 by 20 filter at the back, which is then attached to, on the outside of the spray booth, a 20-inch square floor fan, and that draws all of the overspray through the filter and traps it there. Well, you can see here that I have my first victim, which will be the pup trailer, and it is sitting on a circular piece of plywood. That plywood is actually mounted onto a turntable so that I don't have to touch the piece when I'm spraying. I'm working on top of my table saw, so you can see a blue tarp there. That protects the top of my table saw, and in combination with the spray booth and the fan and the filters, that makes it so that there's very little overspray. Not to mention, too, that I use an HVLP system, and that greatly reduces overspray as well. So we can see here on the bench, I have all of my other victims that need to be sprayed all set up on their own discs of plywood, ready to go. And right here, the meat and potatoes of everything that I need to do, which will be the water-based varnish that I'll be using, as well as my HVLP gun set up in the stand that we made here on the show quite some time ago. Guys, I'm going to tell you, filter. It doesn't matter if it's a brand new can. It doesn't matter if it's always been closed. It makes no difference. Filter your finish. Now, I use a water-based finish, and if you remember, we used Danish oil on our pieces, and you may be thinking water and oil don't mix, but as long as the finish is dry, you're fine. And that is why we waited the week before we ever touched or considered spraying it. What the oil finish does, guys, because I use a satin finish water-based varnish, the oil prevents the grain from raising. If I were just to start spraying with water-based finish, the grain on the model would raise like crazy, and I would have an absolute nightmare trying to sand it down. But the oil, here's on the pencil case that we did quite some time ago, the oil prevents the grain from raising with the water-based finish. So what you need to do is, as I said, filter this stuff out really well. I have a regulator here to control the spray or to control the air pressure going into my gun. And guys, please use a respirator. I have a full face respirator that I use, but whatever you use, whether it be just the regular mask style or full face or whatever, just make sure you get one on. Even though this is non-volatile and it's water-based, it can still do some damage to your lungs. Okay, so I'm going to fire up the compressor, and the first thing we're going to do is just a light coat on all pieces. We're not going to worry too much about getting in there and getting full coverage. We're going to cover everything that we can, but don't worry too much if you miss a couple spots, because this is not the only coat these things are going to get. Well, with that first coat done and under our belt, we can now put away our sprayer until the next coat. So what I do is I actually cover this in plastic with a rubber band in between coats. I place the nozzle itself in a tub of water, and when you're ready to do the next coat, you can just shake this out, give it a quick blast with the air compressor to, get all the excess water out of it. And it's no big deal. It's ready to go. No need to clean the gun in between coats as long as you seal it. And just remember, before you spray, give it a little blast with the air compressor to get any residual water out of there. Guys, it's only 45 minutes in between coats, and then you can turn around and do your second, third, fourth, or however many coats you want to do on this model. For me, I'm not sure how many I'm going to do. I will do what it takes until I'm happy with the overall outcome of the finish. Well, part of finishing a model, guys, is keeping your equipment pristine. So this has been cleaned. You want to clean it right after you're done your last coat. It's fine to have the front nozzle here wrapped in plastic in between coats, but the second you're finished the coats, get in there and get this thing perfectly clean. Strip it down and clean it out. From there, after it dries, I like to blow it out with a little bit of compressed air. And then at that point, you really want to lubricate all of your moving parts. I mean, I fully submerge this in water to clean it out. So oil up all of your moving parts, and that's just a little bit of light machine oil, which can be this 3-in-1 stuff. It works great. You just need a couple drops. And there we go. We can put this back into storage. So I'd just like to point out, I don't know if you can see it, but look at all the condensation and water inside of this water filter. Now, this here is a filter that I run. You want to run one of these as close to the compressor as you can. I actually connect this right to the compressor and then run my hose out from there. But there is a lot of water and a lot of condensation in here that has been filtered out of the air lines. And there's a lot of reasons for water in your lines. It could be humidity, different temperature variances. There's all kinds of reasons. It doesn't matter what the reason is. What matters is that you get a filter on here, because all of this water that's in here is water that would have been sprayed on our finish, and it would have ruined our finish. So these things are fairly cheap. So get yourself a filter. Now, truth be told, it has been about 5 days since I sprayed this. The finish is completely dry and completely smooth, but we're now going to remove the masking. And I guess I'll show you the final results of what it comes out like. And there you have it. My method of finishing the scale models. Guys, look at the results. This thing looks incredible. And one of the things that I like the most about the way these finishes turned out on the models is the fact that I take the extra time and go the extra step to mask out the tires, because I don't want them to be shiny. I don't want them to have that same satin finish that the body and the dump bucket have. I want them to be matte. I want them to look kind of rubbery. And what the Danish oil does is it really brings out the color of that walnut and really enhances it. But then by masking it, it doesn't accept the varnish and therefore stays matte in contrast to the rest of the model. Guys, this is so easy to do. And the key, at least for me, and I've done a lot of experimenting with this, the key for me is that Danish oil step at the beginning, getting a good coating and a good soaking in of the Danish oil and having the patience to let it dry for at least minimum a 7-day period. And that allows the wood to be sealed. So when you hit it with that first coating of water-based varnish, because that's what I'm using, a water-based satin finish varnish, the water cannot raise the grain because the grain is already sealed. Now, there will be times throughout the coats that you may see like maybe a couple bumps or maybe one little section that might raise a little, and that's okay. You can get in there very carefully with some 400 or 600 grit sandpaper, wet, dry sandpaper. I prefer 600. And just give it a little wipe. Even just a little spot of dust can leave a little bump on your finish, but using a 400 or a 600 sheet of wet dry sandpaper can very easily take that away. You just want to do a little light sanding, just enough to take away that imperfection, and then wipe it down gently and spray over top of it. Guys, I hit these with 5 coats. And now, truth be told, in between each coat, I only waited 45 minutes. But by doing that, I have learned the hard way that those finishes all the way through each consecutive coat, they're not 100% dry when you apply the next. And while they're very dry to the touch, they're not 100% cured. For me, that does a couple things. Number one, it eliminates the need to sand to give the next coat something to adhere to, because they're such light coats, and that undercoating, we'll call it, is not 100% dry. The next coat has no trouble adhering to it. But what it also does is makes the finish very soft for a period of time. So I try not to mess around with these much at all for at least another 2 to 3 weeks. And the reason for that is it gives that finish a chance to completely 100% cure and harden, so it doesn't readily or easily accept, say, scratches in the finish, or even dents with, say, your fingernails or too much pressure with your thumbs. You can damage that finish until it's dry. So if you leave it for about 2 to 3 weeks, it's perfect after that. Rock hard, looks great. I've done models, sprayed them like 10 years ago, and they still look as good today as what they did when I first sprayed them. Now, guys, with using varnish, varnish is inherently weird. It's going to darken. It's going to change over time. So what you see with the model here now, in 5 years, it's not going to look like this. It is going to get darker as it goes, and anything with a lighter color wood is going to start to yellow. That is the nature of varnish, and you cannot avoid that. Even with water-based varnishes, that is the nature of them. However, because it does it so evenly across the model, the final product, even years down the road, looks absolutely amazing. I love the look of it. So guys, I hope you've enjoyed this. Really easy to do. HVLP spraying is nothing to fear. I know it can be a little intimidating to take a model that you spent hundreds of hours to work on and then hit it with spray that you don't know if it's going to work. But remember, the key is very light coats. It's better to put on 10 light coats than 2 heavy coats. So very light coats to avoid runs. Inspect after each coat to make sure that there's no imperfections that you need to fix or sand out, and give it time to cure. That's one of the most important. But guys, you got to give this a try because it takes your models to a whole new level. Guys, I want to thank you so much for tuning in this week. I want to thank you very much for the show suggestion and asking how I perform this. Because without your suggestions, I may have never produced this show. So I hope for those of you that were asking how I apply the finish, I hope you've enjoyed this. I hope you're going to give it a try for yourself. Guys, if you haven't already, please consider liking and subscribing to the channel. Share the video with your friends so that they can enjoy the channel as well. I'm trying to grow a bigger and more interactive audience here, and your help would be greatly appreciated. I want to thank you so much for tuning in, guys. I hope you've enjoyed this week's content. I hope you found it informative, and I hope that even if this isn't a method for you and your model making, maybe you can pull out bits and pieces of it and take something positive away from the show. But more importantly, guys, I hope you're going to join me again next week when I bring you yet another Alternative Tuesday.